The chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Randy Rolle.
Thank you for recognizing me, Madam President. As I heard my colleague, Senator Raming, talking about his Pinewood days, I remember my good friend from Pinewood, Madam President, that said, he ain't give me food, he can give me dirt. But clearly, we know that Senator Raming would have listened to the Prime Minister last evening, and one of the things that the Prime Minister said to all there was that PLPs and us on this side must stay focused, Madam President. This is serious business and these are serious times. And so I intend to stay focused, Madam President. With that, Madam President, with your leave, I first want to take an opportunity to remind the public and those in Bimini that tomorrow is a national holiday in our island as the draft takes place. And we look forward to our hometown boy, VJ Edgecombe, being a part of the draft and making history for the island. Madam President. Madam President, I got the opportunity to speak at the Lewis MacDonald High School last week. And one of the things I spoke to the graduates about is I told them about another fella from Bimini who played basketball one time ago. And I remember growing up as a young boy, Madam President, I wanted to be like him. But somewhere along the way, he lost focus. And so what I told him, Madam President, was life is about choices. And as life is about choices, so are everything that we do, even in this place, Madam President. So for the Bahamian people, the choice is clear. We have a good budget and we look forward to what's to come in the future, all right? So Madam President, with that, colleagues and friends, fellow Bahamians, pleasant good afternoon. Today I rise with a great sense of pride and purpose to discuss the people's budget, focus on expanding opportunities island by island. Madam President, this year's national budget is a historic moment. This is the first time that a government has tabled a budget surplus. This, Madam President, was achieved not by cutting services, but by investing in people. This government also spurred one of the strongest post-COVID economic rebounds in the region, fueled by increased investor confidence and private sector growth. But, Madam President, as expected, the opposition doubts our progress. They question how we could possibly achieve a surplus. To them, I say, watch us do it. But we didn't forget that when people needed them the most, Madam President, they showed no care at all. This New Day government promised to strengthen the economy and focus on growth. And Madam President, we did it. Madam President, while some former members and members on the opposite side seeks to undermine their present leadership and leave them deeply fractured from within, but instead, Madam President, of presenting a real vision of solutions for the Bahamian people, they rely on political gimmicks and stunts. Don't think the Bahamian people forgot the spectacle with the mace. It was an embarrassing moment of chaos that showed their desperation rather than meaningful direction. Shame, shame, shame. Madam President, it was never about the people. It was always about power. It was supposed to be the people's time. Y'all remember that?
Yes.
But Bahamians are still wondering who and which people. The opposition had every opportunity to offer substance, but instead chose to offer the Bahamian people a sideshow. But this Davis administration, Madam President, remains focused on the future. This administration is committed to our vision and focus on the execution of sustainable development for all Bahamians. While the F&M grabs at straws for relevance, the PLP is building a path forward that puts the needs of Bahamian families, communities, and the next generation first. This government's proactive stance, tough but necessary reforms, and unwavering commitment to doing what's right, Bahamians will reap the benefit. Let's talk numbers, Madam President. Real GDP growth of 3.4%. Our economy stands today at $14.1 billion, surpassing pre-pandemic levels by more than $1.5 billion. This, Madam President, is what effective governance looks like. International agencies, as discussed even yesterday, like Moody's and S&P's, are taking note and acknowledge that the Bahamas is indeed headed in the right direction. Madam President, I repeat, what is good for the Bahamian people is bad for the F&M. It seems the opposition are the only ones who refuse to see the truth. I think that's because the truth doesn't play into their narrative of this New Day government. Madam President, this Davis administration has laid a solid foundation for national progress through its blueprint for change. And the Bahamian people want to see this plan built out. From job creation and digital transformation to climate resilience and education reform. This government, Madam President, prioritize the everyday needs of Bahamians. We have reaffirmed this commitment, outlining bold legislative action and policy initiatives to protect consumers, strengthen communities, and build a more inclusive and prosperous economy. Expanding opportunities island by island means no island will be forgotten. Madam President, I'm especially grateful to the Honorable Prime Minister and the Progressive Liberal Party for ensuring that my home of Bimini has strong representation. I encourage and thank the Member of Parliament, Mr. Kingsley Smith, for the work that he's doing and encourage him to keep pushing. Biminites are resilient people and resourceful people, Madam President. I am proud to say that in these halls, my people, through the PLP, gets 2 for 1, Madam President. 1 member in the lower house and a member in the upper house. Bimini is where my navel string is buried, Madam President. And I will not be still until I am confident that the people of Bimini gets the result and they deserve from my government. Madam President, across the archipelago, we are seeing targeted investments to strengthen public infrastructure, stimulate private sector growth, and incentivize the creation of new industries and new opportunities. Roads are being built and repaved. Water systems are being upgraded. Energy reform is being prioritized. And education and training programs are expanding so that every Bahamian can upskill, grow, and thrive. This budget, Madam President, is designed to open doors to education, entrepreneurship, and modern infrastructure so that no Bahamian is locked out of progress, whether they live in Bimini, Andros, or Maguana. Now, Madam President, as I turn to the subject I so love, consumer. As Chairman of Consumer Protection Commission, Madam Chairman, I see tremendous opportunities in this year's budget to reshape and strengthen our consumer market across every island of the Bahamas. Here's what this new budget means for everyday Bahamians. Lower VAT and duty reductions on essentials, reducing the cost of living. Historic investments in lifelong learning and job readiness training to empower Bahamians to access higher paying opportunities, opening new pathways towards upward mobility. More scholarships and grants to open doors to academic and career advancement, regardless of the income level or background. Investments in school digital infrastructure will help to reduce educational inequalities and support 21st century learning. Addressing the digital and moving towards a modern government. This administration's Business Development Incentive Program, ACT, will open up new avenues for local investments and job creation. Better access to healthcare with increased investments in the public and private healthcare sector. Children in particular will now benefit from improved nutrition and support at the start of school day with free breakfast programs. Renewed focus on sustainability and maritime protection. Better infrastructure and utilities through innovative strategies. And tourism development and cultural preservation. Further to these policies, Madam President, by this Davis administration is our commitment to Grand Bahama. This is more than rebuilding infrastructure and saving jobs. It's about restoring dignity to the lives of Grand Bahamians who have suffered for far too long. Even when the majority of the island, Madam President, had been fully represented by them. Madam President, I repeat, 5 members of Parliament, 4 cabinet ministers, 2 senators, 1 governor general, 1 president of the Senate, and 0 progress for Grand Bahama under their administration, Madam President. Shame, shame, shame. But this Davis administration is building a marketplace, Madam President, that works for people, not just around them. Whether it's opening avenues for rebuilding and recovery, lowering the cost of essentials, modernizing public spaces, or empowering local entrepreneurs. As Grand Bahama rises, the Consumer Protection Commission and Consumer Affairs stands ready to ensure this growth happens with accountability, transparency, and equality. For Grand Bahama, we intend to launch targeted consumer education campaigns on contracts, loans, health services, housing, and fair pricing. We will deploy CPC agents on the island for quality control to reach remote and establish easy accessible complaint resolutions for building supplies and services rendered. Madam President, I intend to work closely with the team also from price control under the leadership of Mr. Rex Adley, as together we will tackle these issues together. Madam President, all of these efforts fall under the Affordable Bahamas Initiative mandated by this Davis administration, a bold, people-centered strategy designed to put power back in the hands of the Bahamian consumer. And Madam President, let me be clear, none of this works without a strong, functioning, and fair marketplace. That's where the Consumer Protection Commission steps in. It is our role to ensure that when these policies take shape and are rolled out, the marketplace operates in lockstep with the people's interests. Consumer rights, Madam President, are not optional. They are essential. Madam President, let me repeat that. Consumer rights are not optional. They are essential. As also chairman of the Consumer Protection Commission, I know that these reforms lay the groundwork for even greater protections. But I want to assure the public that the Consumer Protection Unit, CPC, is hard at work. I am also happy to report, Madam President, that the Commission is on target to surpass its numbers of claims processed last year with a significant recovery rate. From January 1st to June 10th, 2025, the CPC, Madam President, has received 139 complaint reports. From this number, 22 were advice given to consumers, 10 were referrals to other agencies, and 107 were disputes between consumers and providers that fall under the CPC's remit. Madam President, the ever-capable CPC team has resolved some 45 matters to date, with about 62 still open and under investigation. So far for this year, the CPC has processed 206,391.86 in claims and have recouped, Madam President, 116,872.57, all refunded back in the pocket of consumers. Thanks to this Davis administration. This gives us a recovery rate, Madam President, of 56.63%. Most of these complaints that remain outstanding involves a number of timeshare and beauty aid disputes. But there has been significant decline in complaints against couriers, auto parts stores, and contractors. Madam President, what we are seeing is the more work we do, the more public is seeking out support to ensure they are not being taken advantage of by local sellers. We see this as a step in the right direction, and we are encouraged by the public's response to our efforts to continue to educate and update the general public on consumer protection matters. Now, while not every claim may be valid, every one of them has been heard. Some of the other complaints we often hear include overcharged goods, under-delivered orders, unfinished work, poor quality of work, poor customer service, services not rendered, expired items being sold and shipped to the family islands, damaged goods, hidden credit card charges, hidden restocking fees, duplicated charges, product damage during installation, and so much more. Madam President, the CPC team has to deal with irate customers and try to help them at their most frustrated times. Thank you. Madam President, I want to thank them for their hard work and dedication and publicly acknowledge them for their public service. Madam President, these persons include Vanessa Ferguson, Melissa Monroe, Khadijah Neely, Glenn Colebrook, Austina Knowles, Elva Thompson, Alfred Taylor, and Timothy Gibson. Madam President, again, I thank them for all that they do. They are the core of the results we are seeing at the CPC, and I am honored to serve as their chairman. Madam President, the CPC is currently expanding our secret shopper program, putting more employees out in the field, monitoring public consumer spaces, ensuring fair treatment, and household businesses, we are making sure they are accountable. We are doing this again along with the team from price control, and we are happy to be working on behalf of the Bahamian people. We are also working on along with the Trade Commission, a new mobile app that would make the services of the CPC accessible to the public. We are cracking down on the sale of expired goods, especially ensuring the quality of items being sent to the family islands are adequate. And while our government is reviewing the oversaturation and proliferation of liquor stores in the community, we are working closely with our sister agencies to ensure that stores aren't selling fake liquor that will make people sick. What is cheap is not always good. Madam President, we want businesses and consumers to be vigilant because we are watching, and they will be penalized if found breaking the law. And Madam President, whilst I'm talking about cautions, sorry, no problem. And Madam President, while I'm talking about cautions, I want to put predatory lending institutions on guard that offer unsecured consumer loans at absurd and ridiculous rates. We are also watching you. You will not be allowed to go unchecked. I'm thankful that, my minister addressed some of this the other day in his contribution and talking about working along with the Securities Commission to make sure that, again, we safeguard the rights of consumers straight across the Bahamas. Madam President, the other day I was on Fish Fry, and I was talking to a good friend who was talking about wanting new clients for unsecured loans. I want to also put Bahamians on guard to be careful with these types of offers. Also concerning are the disadvantage to consumers by banks and lending institutions in the Bahamas. These include high interest rates on loans and credits, limited access to credit, excessive banking fees, lack of transparency, predatory lending practices, limited consumer protections. And I'm not only talking about Nassau. Madam President, the Bahamian people have been suffering for far too long at the hands of financial predators. To prevent predatory lending, and again, there are laws that govern it, in the Bahamas, it is essential to strengthen regulatory oversight, enhance financial literacy, and enforce transparent lending practices. There's a need to implement clear interest rate caps, mandate full disclosures of loans, terms, and closely monitor non-bank lenders. At the same time, Madam President, public education campaigns should empower consumers to make informed financial decisions and recognize exploitative lending. Madam President, I also want to touch base with my colleagues in housing, and, most times Bahamians, we have done an excellent job in putting Bahamians in home, Madam President. But we've seen that people get these mortgages for homes, but then they go and they finance furniture, Madam President. And Madam President, not calling names, but in some of these places, Madam President, they make more money off the financing than they do of actual furniture, Madam President. This is wrong, Madam President. And I'm thankful that our government, I'm thankful that we will look at ways that we can help Bahamians in every way, shape, or form, Madam President. There must be collaboration with the government, financial institutions, and civil society to build a fair and responsible lending environment that protects vulnerable individuals and support sustainable economic growth. Madam President, some of these lending agencies are taking advantage of the Bahamian people. Some loans have interest rates of up to 20%. And Madam President, this is wrong. The Bahamas presently lacks comprehensive statistics on predatory lending by non-bank lenders. But we know this is happening when we hear stories like my friend I saw at Fish Fry. We must help the most vulnerable in our society. And Madam President, I plan to be a change agent in my role as Consumer Protection Commissioner. We need to ensure that more data is available and more education initiatives are done to help our people. Madam President, we just don't want to regulate. We want to empower. Madam President, I notice how, we did such a good job in terms of even the debt ratio as it relates to the country, Madam President. This is the type of education and information that regular Bahamians need to ensure that they're not putting themselves in debt that, again, could possibly, destroy the future of things they want to do, Madam President. Madam President, we're expanding our outreach so that every Bahamian knows their rights, knows how to report wrongdoings, and feels confident that standing up for fairness. When consumers are protected, Madam President, and business are transparent, everybody wins. Madam President, we know that no government is perfect, and we are not claiming to be. We know we will not be able to solve all problems all at once, but we are giving Bahamians a clear sense of direction. This government has been consistent in its approach to offer relief and opportunities. Madam President, to the cabinet ministers of the Bahamas, to my colleagues, as a senator charged with advocating for the welfare of all Bahamian people, I am pleased to extend sincere thanks and appreciation to each member of the Davis administration. Your dedication, service continues to bring about real measurable change in the lives of everyday Bahamians, especially our consumers, who depend on affordable goods, reliable public service, and fair wages. To our Prime Minister, Philip Edward Davis, your leadership has been a catalyst for long overdue reform. Your administration's bold decision to increase the minimum wage and implement public sector salary adjustments have provided critical relief for workers across the Bahamas. These efforts have directly improved the financial standings of thousands of families and restored dignity to countless civil servants who have long labored without recognition. I also wish to extend, Madam President, appreciation to the Minister of Labor and Public Service, the Honorable Pierre Glover, for your groundbreaking work in the regularization and promotion confirmations of long-serving public officers. Through your efforts, hundreds of civil servants have received long-deserving appointments, letters of promotion, and in increments, many for the first time in decades, Madam President. You deserve broad fairness. You brought fairness and structure back to the public service, and in doing so, improve morale, stability, and service delivery for the Bahamian people. I thank you, my sister. I commend Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Tourism, Investment, and Aviation, the Honorable Chester Cooper, for expanding employment through tourism, growth, and revitalization investment across the nation. These efforts have not only boosted jobs, but have strengthened our economic resilience and service economy. To my minister, the Minister of Economic Affairs, Senator the Honorable Michael Alcides, thank you for championing cost of living relief and price regulations, and for launching reforms that support fair markets, consumer protection, and small business viability. To the Attorney General, my brother, Leo Ryan Pinder, Minister of Legal Affairs, thank you for prioritizing legal reform that promotes transparency and protects consumers and citizens alike. I acknowledge the Minister of Health and Wellness, the Honorable Michael Darville, for expanding healthcare across and moving us closer to universal coverage, improving affordability and trust in our public health system. To a Minister of Education, Technical and Vocational Training, the Honorable Glenys Hanna Martin, your reform in both formal and technical education empower the next generation and build stronger, more capable workforce for our country. I express deep appreciation to the Minister of Social Services, Information and Broadcasting, the Honorable Miles LaRota, who supports program and upheld our most vulnerable population and ensured that dignity and compassion remain central to government assistance. I commend Minister of National Security, the Honorable Wayne Munro, for strengthening crime prevention and targeting fraud efforts that protect the financial interests and safety of Bahamian consumers. To the Minister of Energy and Transport, the Honorable Jobek Colby Davis, your improvements to public transport system and your push for energy reform has created more affordable and reliable services for working Bahamians. To the Minister of Housing and Urban Renewal, the Honorable Keith Bell, your leadership in developing accessible and affordable housing gives Bahamian families the opportunity to own and safeguard a home. To the Minister of Works and Family Island Affairs, the Honorable Clay Sweeting, thank you for championing infrastructure expansion across Family Islands and ensuring that residents in every corner of the Bahamas are included in our national development. To the Minister of Agriculture and Marine Resources, the Honorable Jumbo Campbell, your push to support local farmers and fishers is key to food security and consumers saving on healthy, homegrown options. I also thank the Minister of Youth, Sports and Culture, the Honorable Mario Boleg, for nurturing national pride and youth engagement, foundation to social cohort and responsible citizenship. To the Minister of Energy and Environment, Natural Resources, the Honorable Vaughn Miller, your advocacy for sustainable development ensures that environmental protection and consumer affordability go hand in hand. To Minister of Grand Bahama, the Honorable Ginger Moxie, your commitment to economic revitalization and community renewal is restoring vibrancy and opportunity to Grand Bahamian residents and businesses. And to the Minister of Immigration and National Insurance, the Honorable Alfred says, thank you for managing essential services that safeguard workers' rights and ensure equality access to benefits and protections. To each of you, through your respective ministries, have played a critical role in shaping a consumer environment that is fair, affordable, and secure. From wage increase and housing to healthcare and transportation, you directly improve the quality of life for all citizens. Let us continue to work side by side to build a Bahamas where hard work is rewarded, opportunity is equal, and no one is left behind. We have governed for the present and planned for the future. And one thing remains true. This country is in a far better place today than when the F&M was in office. Looking ahead. Thank you, my brother. Thank you. Looking ahead, I'm excited for the future of full transformational growth for our national development. And I proudly, Madam President, support this bill. With this, I rest. Thank you very much, Madam President.